Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BP Learning Channel. Today, we are going to talk about how to review and interpret a standard cash flow report, the one used by most folks in the business world. This sounds pretty basic, right? Rather mundane, perhaps, and yet many entrepreneurs launch and run a business without using a report like this. They hope and they pray they have enough money to make the next payroll and enough money to develop and grow their business. I'm Debbie, a certified SBDC coach at the Business Incubator Center. The incubator is a partner with the Colorado Small Business Development Center under the SBA or U.S. Small Business Administration. I am also a former business owner myself, a former CFO for multiple startup ventures in the Silicon Valley, and a CPA with my master's in finance. That's me, folks, and I'm here today to help you understand how to decipher a cash flow report so you can use it to help you manage your business. Let's start by walking through the basic structure of this report, and then we can talk about what it all means. We'll start by talking about bank accounts. You can't get more basic than that, right? Bank accounts. Most companies have more than one bank account. Typically, there are at least 3 types of accounts: operating, savings, and payroll. Some companies have a lockbox account to facilitate the collection of receivables. Some even have multiple operating accounts. These are the traditional ones: operating, savings, payroll, and lockbox. Many companies now have one or more merchant accounts. These are accounts that allow a business to accept payments in multiple ways, typically debit or credit cards. Merchant accounts might include Shopify, Amazon, Stripe, and Square. All accounts with cash transactions should be accumulated when doing cash flow analysis and planning. Let's talk about basic cash flow mechanics. Every company starts with some kind of bucket of cash. This is called the cash at the beginning of a period. During the period, cash goes into the bucket and cash goes out. Money comes into the bucket from either operating activities, the sale of a product or service, less expenses to produce this product or service, called net profit or net loss, also called net income or net loss, or money comes into this bucket from a capital infusion. This is called a financing activity, perhaps a loan from a bank or contributions from investors, owners, family, friends, or other interested parties. And finally, money goes out of the bucket for equipment, machinery, furniture, or other infrastructure items that are required to support a company's operating activities. These are called investing activities or capital expenditures. Collectively, these 3 activities result in a change of your cash balance, either up or down, and that brings you to the cash bucket at the end of the period. And there you have it, the basic mechanics of cash accounts. A bucket full of cash at the start of a period with activity in 3 different categories during the period that gets you to a larger or smaller bucket of cash at the end of the period. Note, There are 3 types of cash activities that go through the bucket. Let's take a closer look at each one of these now. Operating activities, the heart of every business, what I call the river of value in your business. But this river requires an infrastructure and funding, and these requirements differ from business to business depending upon the product or services being sold. Investing activities provide the infrastructure required to support your ongoing operations. Items like equipment, vehicles, furniture and fixtures, and maybe even a building. Financing activities are required to jumpstart a business, fund infrastructure, and possibly operations. It can come in various forms. A line of credit for operations, usually from a bank. Loans from family, friends, or an owner. A capital infusion from owners. A capital infusion from outside investors. Capital. Now, let's go over these terms one more time. Hang in there with me, folks, while we review these new terms one more time. I'm trying to plant some seeds for you. Operating activities, the river of value in your business. Investing activities, infrastructure required for your business. And financing activities, the cash required to fund this infrastructure and sometimes your operations. This cash can come from operating reserves, from loans, or from a capital infusion of some kind. And this bucket of cash funds the infrastructure that's required to support profitability. Profitability and infrastructure funded by operating reserves, loans, and or a capital infusion create value. And value is the ultimate goal of any business venture. 3 new terms for you today. These terms are the foundation of a cash flow statement and or projection. They are terms frequently used in the business world. So we are going to dive into these terms a bit more, starting with operating activities, which is all about profitability, the river of value in your business. Profitability equals value. I'm planting a seed right now. And profitability is one of the 2 major components that appear in a cash flow statement. Profitability, the river of value in any business, the river of value on a steady state basis. This is all about matching revenue with expenses. And this is component 1, called operating activities. Let me help you understand what I mean. In a perfect world, revenue is collected during the same period that bills are paid, generally monthly. But the world, as we all know, is not a perfect world. there is revenue to collect and bills to pay. In most industries, revenue is collected 30 days after invoicing and at least 30 days after a customer uses a credit card. Bills are usually paid within 30 days after receiving a vendor invoice, but sometimes a company postpones payment due to a cash flow shortage. When this happens, we have financing activities come into play. Sometimes a cash infusion may be required, perhaps a loan from family or friends, a loan from a bank, a shareholder loan, maybe a credit card or two, or a contribution from the owner. It's a bit of a balancing act, waiting for money to come from sales to pay for the bills. Okay, let's talk about how we solve the balancing act dilemma in a company's daily operations. Basically, matching revenue with expenses so we have profitability on a steady state basis. The answer is something called working capital, a bucket of value that sits in a holding tank for a while called a balance sheet. We'll talk about that in a bit. In simple terms, working capital is the cash required by a business to meet its day-to-day operating expenses, items related to operating activities that have not yet translated into cash. It's a way to smooth the timing differences between when cash comes into a business and when it must go out. The balancing act. In a technical sense, this is a financial metric which represents liquidity in a business, a metric that has a basic mathematical equation. Current assets minus current liabilities equals net current assets or working capital. And what does current mean? Anything less than 1 year. Let's take a closer look. We're looking at a working capital computation now. Remember, working capital is the current liquidity available from a company's operating activities. Let's look at the basic components and see how it works. It begins with current assets. In this case, cash, accounts receivable, and inventory. Next, we have current liabilities. In this case, accounts payable and accrued salaries. When you subtract the liabilities from the assets, you get what's called net current assets or working capital. And all of these numbers can be used to measure liquidity. What is liquidity? The ease with which a company can convert its assets into cash. Strong liquidity means that there's enough cash to pay off any debts in the near term, usually within a year. Weak liquidity is when a company doesn't have enough money or readily available assets like receivables or inventory that can be liquidated to pay its short-term debt. And why is this so important? Because bankers and investors will assess liquidity when assessing whether or not they want to finance your company. A highly liquid company is likely to get a line of credit from a bank, a credit line that can be used to help smooth out a company's working capital needs. That balancing act, remember? While a company with poor liquidity will likely be too much of a risk for bankers and some investors. Here's a few ratios that bankers and investors use to measure liquidity. I just want you to see a few of these ratios so you understand how to measure the short-term performance of your business and why the working capital number is so important in a cash flow report. Let's start with the current ratio. This ratio measures a company's ability to cover its short-term obligations with its current assets. A good range is 1.5 to 3.0. This means that you have more assets than you have liabilities. The inventory turnover rate measures the number of times inventory is sold or used during a time period such as a year. A higher ratio equals stronger sales. That means you're buying and selling your inventory faster. And finally, the receivable turnover ratio measures the number of times a company collects its average receivable balance during a time period. 7.8 is considered good on average. As a former CFO, I would push to see 12.0. I would like to see my receivables turn over every month. All right, I've been walking you through the major ingredients of cash flow. We have talked a lot about operating activities or profitability, component 1 of the cash flow report. We also talked about working capital, operating items that have not yet translated into cash. This is part of component 2 of the cash flow report. But before we talk about component 2, let's talk about what other value ingredients there are that have not yet translated into cash. These items appear along with working capital on your balance sheet or net asset report, something I prefer to call a holding tank of value. I hate the term balance sheet. Why? Because it really has no practical meaning in the business world. Technically, a balance sheet presents a company's financial position at any point in time. It's an indication of net worth or value at a particular point in time. In other words, if the company were to liquidate today, what would the owners potentially get? How much would they walk away with from the business? So why do they call it something silly like a balance sheet? Because it needs to balance, believe it or not. It's a term used for a mathematical equation that needs to balance in the accounting world. Assets minus liabilities equal equity. Equity is net worth or net assets or value. Crazy, right? They call it a balance sheet. I wish they would throw this term away. But unfortunately, that won't happen anytime soon. So, let's focus on value, and let me share with you my concept of a holding tank of value. I want you to think of your business as a holding tank of value. Value flows in and out of this tank on a continuous basis. It comes from your income statement or your operating activities. This creates inflows into the tank from sales and an outflow from the tank for expenses. We talked about working capital. Working capital sits in the tank until cash comes in and you can put the cash into the bank. Next, we have investing activities. Basically outflows from the tank, except for sales. If you sell a piece of equipment, that might create an inflow. And finally, we have financing activities. These are inflows into the tank, except for debt payments on loans. Financing loans, financing from owners. This is the balance sheet. This is the holding tank of value. Value due to working capital, due to investments you own. Value that is created by loans and created by financing from owners. All of this information flows through the cash flow statement. And now we are ready to talk about component 2. And that's the balance sheet, a holding tank of value. But let's talk about what happens when value changes inside of this tank due to operating, investing, and financing activities. All of this is component 2 of the cash flow report. Cash inflows and outflows from the holding tank changes. Here's your holding tank of value. Working capital, investments are sitting there, financing from loans, and financing from owners. Cash inflows increase cash in the cash flow statement, and cash outflows from this tank decrease cash for each item in the holding tank. The math looks like this for each of the items. Cash inflows are a plus or an add. Cash outflows are a subtraction or a minus. In this case, the net change is a positive number. $100 came in, $10 went out. The net change is $90. Now, we're finally ready to look at a simple cash flow statement. The purpose of the cash flow statement is to present inflows and outflows of cash for a period of time, which provides valuable information regarding the financial health and performance of a company. As we've been saying, it includes 2 components. Net profit or net loss, also called net income, on a steady state basis. This is component 1, profitability. Net profit or net loss includes working capital, uncollected revenue, and unpaid expenses. Since working capital has not yet translated into cash, this is adjusted below in component 2 as a holding tank item. Component 2 consists of balance sheet changes or holding tank changes. Balance sheet changes includes money in and out of the value holding tank related to operating activities in the form of working capital, investing activities related to building infrastructure called capital expenditures, and financing activities. Financing may be external in the form of loans or internal. Loans are a capital infusion from owners. It might also come from operating reserves. Let's walk through how the numbers flow in this statement. Cash at the beginning of a period in the bucket is $450. Cash increased in this bucket as a result of net profit of $560. Cash went up. Cash went up again as a result of balance sheet changes of $490. And this all resulted in an ending cash balance in the bucket of $1,500. Cash increased during this period by $1,050. And this is how a cash flow statement works. Cash is king, right? That's what most of us say in the business world. Without it, short-term operations and long-term growth and survival are nearly impossible. And that's why cash flow reports are an absolute necessity for every business. Reports that present historical trends, what happened in the recent past, and reports that project the future, what's expected to happen in the short term and in the long term. Reports like this, however, are only useful if an entrepreneur or owner understands what they mean. So, let's do a quick review of what we learned today about how to review and interpret a standard cash flow report. Big picture, a standard cash flow report presents cash inflows and cash outflows for a period of time from 1. Operating activities or profitability, and 2. Holding tank value changes. Big picture, let's take a look at how cash flows in and out of the cash flow statement one more time. Cash flows in and out of your bank accounts. Cash also flows in and out of your merchant accounts. These transactions are based on credit cards attached to the merchant accounts. Collectively, this information feeds the income statement or the statement of profit and loss, which represents the profitability in a company. This information also feeds the balance sheet or the value holding tank. The income statement, which represents operating activities on a steady state basis, is component 1 in the cash flow report. The balance sheet feeds operating, investing, and finance activities, component 2, into the cash flow report. These are value changes in the holding tank. And now, let's go over the cash flow mechanics once again. We have a bucket of cash at the beginning of the period. We add or subtract cash to that bucket based on component 1, net profit or loss on a steady state basis. Then we add or subtract balance sheet changes, component 2, to the bucket. And that gives us an ending bucket balance. So now we know how much cash we had in the beginning of the period, what happened on a profitability basis, what happened to value changes in the holding tank, and how much cash is remaining at the end of the period. So, if you are an entrepreneur or hope to be an entrepreneur very soon, and you are not using a cash flow report yet, either to launch a business as part of a business plan or to manage your business on a daily basis, then I want you to do 3 things after you leave this session today. 1, visit my website. Take a look at the 3 reference guides available here and download one of the strategic learning tools called a standard cash flow model. I'll take a moment and show you where it is. Here's the toolbox, and all you have to do is click on this, and that will bring you to the toolbox page. The tool I want you to download today is the standard cash flow report that we've been talking about. Number 2, find a coach or mentor, someone like me who can help you learn how to use this tool. A great place to start is your local SBDC center, where folks like me will be available to help you for free. And 3, please subscribe to the Butterfly's Paws channel so you don't miss out on other valuable prosperity tips. And thanks everyone for listening today. I wish you the best in your business endeavors. I wish for you lots of prosperity in your life going forward.